Hello everyone, I am delighted and grateful for you to be spending your time today to learn about product marketing content. Excited to get into this course with you and talk about all the great things that come along with content and product marketing. It's my specialty, it's my passion, and I'm delighted to talk to you today about a bunch of things that will set you apart and help you become more of a strategic marketing professional. Before we get into the course outline and the lesson plan, let's just get out of the way, right? Let's do this thing, content marketing. In the words of the great Ron Burgundy, it's kind of a big deal. At the end of the day, everything that you do, what your brand stands for, a lot of the tactics that you're gonna be distributing, and the way that you engage your audiences, whether it's through direct channels on the digital side, or through an event experience, or even through your sales channel, it all comes back to content. Content is how we engage audiences. It's how we move people through the buying life cycle, through the journey, and it's what we'll be spending all of today about getting into product marketing content. So let's go through and review the journey of this course for product marketing content. We're gonna cover 5 lessons through this journey together. Number 1 is taking an agile approach to product content marketing. Thinking like an agile software developer, but taking the best of Agile and applying it to the marketing profession. Number 2 is around prioritizing product marketing content. So before you get into building and starting to craft, how do you even know that what you're working on is the right thing? We're gonna cover that in prioritization. Number 3, we're gonna get into how you close the sale with product marketing content and how to make sure that the content that you're creating is leading to the outcomes that you've set for yourself and your brand. Number 4, we're gonna get into digging into the website experience. So what type of content should be on your website? How does it change? How does it need to change for your web experience and differentiate from the other types of content that you're likely responsible for? And then finally, number 5, we're gonna get into differentiating between product-centric and customer-centric content. Is there a world where both of those types of content exist? I think there is, and we're gonna get into that as well in the final lesson of this course. So, lesson number 1, Agile Marketing. Before we get into developing what you're gonna be building, I'd like to spend some time with you talking about how to build product marketing content and some really great tips for developing an agile approach. 1, let's learn about what agile content teams do and don't do and how they can actually help advance your marketing objectives. Number 2, we're gonna understand the ceremonies, which I know is an agile terminology that we'll get into momentarily, but we're gonna learn about what the 5 ceremonies are of agile marketing, how that applies to the work that you and your teams will be spending your time on. And then number 3, would love to talk to you about avoiding some common pitfalls as it relates to agile marketing. So let's get into why agile marketing in the first place. Well, here's a statistic for you. According to Agile Sherpas, 42% of traditional marketers plan to adopt agile within 1 year. And as customer expectations change and technology becomes more sophisticated, there's a real rationale of why you should consider adopting an agile approach to how you create your content marketing strategy with your teams and within your brand. In many cases, agile marketing can actually be much more effective than traditional styles of marketing where you might take more of a waterfall approach. In my experience, my brand went through an agile marketing transformation about 4 years ago, and I can tell you the dividends are still paying off thanks to our investment in making an agile marketing transformation at that time. So at the end of this course, one of the things I would love to invite you to think about is how, after you review the 5 ceremonies of agile marketing and the lessons it could have within developing your approach, how it could actually enable you to be a better marketer. So how about defining what is agile marketing? Well, here's a definition from the agile marketing experts at Agile Sherpas. Agile marketing is the deliberate, long-term application of a specific agile methodology to manage and improve the way of marketing teams gets work done. So this is all about how you actually build the work and how you work within a team. One of the things you can see is that agile marketing teams are very similar to software development teams in this regard. Full stack teams inclusive of creative and strategist, data analyst, legal, technology, working together to come towards aligned business outcomes. So agile marketing is something that I would love to talk a little bit more about as we get into what value could have in your business model. So here's how you can think about shifting your approach from, say, traditional marketing to agile marketing. So let's go from managing productivity to really managing value. Agile marketing is all about focusing on continuous delivery to improve your audience's experience. Also going from execution culture to more differentiating craftsmanship culture. And so how do you go from actually responding to a lot of the different requests that you're probably inundated with on a day-to-day basis with really making sure that the culture that you have within the team is really based on craftsmanship? Also, going from making it perfect to making sure that you're testing, learning, and iterating. It's all about progress over perfection for Agile marketing. A big area of Agile marketing is focused on experimentation and testing. One of the things that we're going to talk about is the Agile Manifesto, and that's a resource that we're actually going to put into this lesson for you to download and take a look at. And then finally, bureaucracy over servant leadership. Servant leadership is more about how you, as a leader, enable your teams and remove impediments as opposed to cascading down the work that your team should be working on. It's really about focusing on outcomes and then allowing your team to figure out the best way to make sure that those outcomes are activated in market and serving the needs of your clients. So let's talk about the operating model for Agile marketing. And in this case, we can look at Spotify as a great use case for how they adopted an Agile marketing approach. Experimentation is core to the Agile marketing philosophy. You need to expect 1/3 of your tests to fail, 1/3 of your tests to actually succeed, and probably another third of your tests to be inconclusive. That is expected within the Agile marketing approach. And as you can look, it's important to think about how you organize your teams, shifting from more organizing around projects and more towards disciplined needs that align to your business outcomes. So one way you can think about it is aligning a team towards a particular journey. As an example, if you work in a financial institution, your marketing approach might be thinking about how you approach it around opening an account or potentially transferring of assets. Or you can think about it, if you're in a software development program, potentially aligning around the different products. Finally, in this case, if we look at Spotify as an example, they approached it based on the journey. And so they have 4 separate teams. Team number 1 is more about the top of the funnel. So they are disciplined and focused on driving demand and interest across different elements of awareness for their products and services. Team number 2 is more aligned around the middle of the funnel. So that's probably more around conversion and trying to think about how you go from awareness more towards interest in their different products and services from a B2B experience. Number 3 is more around the bottom of the funnel. So that's all around conversion and driving interest and execution into the products and services. And then number 4 is more around retention. So how do you maintain interest and build a brand of loyalist fans for your offer? And that is what the 4th group is focused on. Regardless of how you approach it, whether it's around products, funnel, journey, something else, it's all about making sure that you have a disciplined team that's focused on specific outcomes. So one of the questions you might ask yourself is, well, if they're focused on different elements of the journey or different elements of the marketing funnel, how do you make sure that the experience that the client or consumer or audience gets is consistent and cohesive throughout that extended life cycle journey? Well, the way to actually account for that is to think about how the makeup of the team interacts with each other. And so even though you might have a team that's focused on, say, one element of the buyer's journey around awareness, top of the funnel, and one that's more around retention, all the way at the bottom of the funnel, you make sure that different specific teams and members of those teams are actually integrating across together as well. So one of the ways you can account for that is actually developing a chapter as an example. In this case, we've taken a look at circling through all the content marketing managers and product marketing managers of that team. And so even though they're working with their own segments of the team to focus on a different component of the buyer's journey, they're getting together to make sure that the experience, the brand, the content, the creative as an example, is consistent and moving forward. At my brand, we call this a guild. In this example, they call it a chapter. Whatever it is, it's making sure that even though you're disciplined by a separate work stream, you're also integrating together the expertise to make sure that there's a cohesive experience across the consumer's buying cycle. So now what we're going to get into are the 5 ceremonies of Agile marketing. We're going to get into the sprint itself and what a sprint even means. We're going to get into what the daily stand-up is and why you spend your time on a daily basis engaging with your team. We're going to talk about how you approach sprint planning, sprint review, and sprint retrospective. So let's get into it. Let's talk a little bit about Agile ceremonies. Okay? So ceremonies are really just a fancy way of the meetings and engagements that you might have with your team as it applies to Agile or Agile marketing. In fact, if you really want to impress your family at Thanksgiving dinner, just start using a whole bunch of Agile lingo, right? It'll excite them and they'll probably ask, well, what on earth do you spend your time doing at work every day? So let's actually start and imagine as if we're living in an Agile universe and we're working through the different components of Agile. What we're going to spend our time talking through are particularly the 5 ceremonies of Agile. And there are 5 of them. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do is talk a little bit about what your backlog could be, right? So imagine this is your backlog. Backlog, again, is another Agile terminology. Fancy terminology that just talks a little bit about all the kinds of things that you can have, right? You might have a sprint backlog, and then that matriculates into your final backlog of outputs. But for the sake of simplicity, let's just say your backlog includes maybe a triangle, and then maybe you've got a circle. Also, we could do a little bit of like a rectangle, right? These are all just little things that you can be doing to meet your objectives of your team. And let's imagine, your team right now that you're leading as, say, the product marketing manager. You have folks that are focused on digital analytics. You have a team that is built with creative. You have writers and you have designers. You have analysts. You have digital marketers. The key to create an Agile marketing team is really to make sure that it's a full stack team. So if you're part of a Agile development team that's focused on building content for the web, maybe you want to have some front-end developers as part of that engagement and part of that team. But these are all full stack teams. Again, using the Spotify model, where they really talked about aligning to journeys, you can really think about how you either want to align to maybe a journey or maybe a particular product or service that you have. Maybe it's a component of the marketing funnel, whether you want to be more growth focused or acquisition focused, or maybe your team is more focused on cross-sell. But being really explicit about what those outcomes and objectives are is crucial and key. And so once you know what your key outcomes are and what your team is going to be focusing on, and you have brought the team together, and you now have a full stack team, you can call yourselves a pod, you can call yourselves a tribe, or really any group, but it's basically your 2 pizza teams, as Jeff Bezos of Amazon would call it. And so you have your to-do list, right? Let's get into what the ceremonies are and how you can start developing. So looking at what the sprint is, the first actual ceremony is really what we call the sprint, right? And so sprint can be anywhere between 2 weeks. It can be 3 weeks, it can be a whole month, it could be 4 weeks. But basically the sprint is the time-boxed period that you and your team are going to be spending together to develop a working piece of increment. And what the increment is it's really, again, just a fancy Agile terminology for a piece of content. It could be, at the end of this sprint, at the end of these 2 weeks, we are going to have, a webcast. It could be at the end of the sprint, we're going to have a new blog from the founder. It could be at the end of the sprint, we are going to have a new one-pager for sales that they can use to engage clients on this brand new feature that we're about to ship out. But you're committing to what you're going to have in 2 weeks, and that's ceremony number 1. Okay, so what we're going to do next is get into ceremony number 2, okay, which is what we call sprint planning. So sprint planning is all about the nitty-gritty details. This is where you're going to be spending your time with your full stack team, and you're going to be agreeing upon what needs to happen in the team in order for this to be the output of the end of your sprint. At this point, you're talking about potentially story pointing some of these projects, which is something that we're going to get into in a later lesson when we get into prioritization. You're going to be spending your time talking about who do we need in order to enable this to happen as the outcome, and you're really going to be focusing on commitment. Okay? Commitment from the team that everyone knows what their role in this sprint is to get to the output of this. So the writer knows that they have to deliver a workable draft. The designer knows that they need to come up with some inspiring photography, as an example. The positioning master, right? You as the product marketing manager knows that you need to have the right narrative in order for all these things to happen. And again, it's the nitty gritty. So you're defining what's going to happen and when it's going to happen. And this is all in sprint planning for your agile content marketing team. It's probably the most, what I would say, detailed and probably less exciting components of the 5 ceremonies, but it's also the most critical, I would say. If you don't get sprint planning right, the whole 2 weeks or whatever that period of time is for what the sprint is, it's just not going to feel right, and there's a high likelihood that you're going to fail. One thing I'll mention, though, with agile ceremonies, it's good to just get started. Try all of this out. You're not going to get it right the first time. It probably took multiple sprints for me and my team to start feeling we had a pretty good vibe. But just focus on giving it a shot, right? If it doesn't feel uncomfortable, you're not doing it right. It should feel like a growth opportunity. It should feel like any type of growth. It should feel uneasy. You're questioning whether it's the right thing or not. Just give it a try and go as it is. One of the other lessons I would say is as you're getting into this first sprint planning session with your team, even the second, even the third, don't pick off, big rock projects. Don't pick off things like, a huge big campaign or even a maybe like a huge event as an example. Focus on small wins at first. Just focus on getting the ceremonies right and the workflow and approach right. And maybe just pick off, like one item from the backlog and put it onto your sprint backlog. And maybe just focus on maybe a 2-week sprint as opposed to a 4-week period for that first initial one. So sprint planning is the second. And that leads us to number 3, which I'm actually going to draw up here. So you have your 2-week sprint period in this example. You have your sprint planning. Once sprint planning is defined, you then go into your daily stand-ups, which is Agile ceremony number 3. The daily stand-up is all about where the team gets together on a daily basis, maximum 15 minutes at a time, right? A lot of times, it's best to have it in the morning. That way you can maybe set the day's plan ahead of time. But at the daily stand-up, it should be really quick and really focused and really answer 3 primary questions. Number 1 is, what did you do yesterday? Number 2 is, what are you going to do today? And number 3 are, what is holding you back from moving forward? What are your impediments? Sometimes what will happen is things will come up in between sprint planning and the daily stand-up that maybe you didn't account for in sprint planning. Maybe you do need to have another person to enable this body of work to happen. Or maybe something that you committed to that you thought would only take 2 days is actually taking you 3 days to get done. Daily stand-up is where you serve up those developments and start talking about what is actually holding you back from moving forward. And then oftentimes it's on the team, particularly the product marketing manager, to listen in particularly for what those impediments are. And then on the back end, once the daily stand-up's over, once that 15-minute concludes, you are off to work to try to remove those impediments and work individually with your team to get it to where it needs to be in the 2-week period that you committed. So that's number 3. We talked about the first one being the sprint itself, number 2 being sprint planning, and number 3 being the daily stand-up. Let's talk about sprint review, which is number 4. Okay. So sprint review is also a time-boxed period. Call it 60 minutes that you have at the end of every single sprint. And so in sprint review, this is where you're going to demo what you provided. So we said we were going to have a webcast. We said we were going to have a new blog from our founder. We said we'd have a new one-pager for sales to engage on this new feature rollout. And so number 4 is really to talk about what you provided, and did you actually make it, were you able to actually deliver on what you committed to and demo it? This is an opportunity to invite other members outside of the sprint team, outside of the pod, the tribe, to come in and start reviewing what the team has done. So it's a time for them to ask questions. It's a time for you really to showcase really what you and your team have provided, get agreement on, drive up a lot of internal excitement, and say, hey, we're about to launch this new blog with our founder. Check it out. In many cases, sometimes what you can do is if you've already distributed that blog in this 2-week period, you can then not just demo it, but also talk about how it performed with some early insights, and then get a conversation going with all the members who have come into the sprint review and talking about what it was you delivered and whether it hit any of the outcomes that you had laid out in the sprint planning section. So that is number 4. And then the number 5 ceremony within Agile that we're going to talk about is probably my second favorite. Actually, it's my favorite. So sprint retrospective, and I gave it a little retro name here, but the full terminology is sprint retrospective. It's all focused on the team, and it's all focused on getting better. From good to great, from great to best. So in Agile ceremony number 5, sprint retrospective, you are actually going to excuse everyone that was in your sprint review and bring it into the team. This is an opportunity to talk about how the team worked together. Did we jive? Did we feel uncomfortable? You're going to have a lot of these in the beginning. A lot of things should come out. In fact, sprint retrospective should be at the end of every single sprint. You should always aim to come out of sprint retrospective with one thing you can do differently and one thing to keep doing. So we want to talk about the wins. We want to talk about what felt wrong. We're actually going to talk about win-loss analysis later in this course, which actually follows a very simple game plan. It's about how you can better yourselves, right? This is kind of like, again, how football teams look at football replays of how their performance was, and they go back and they say, oh gosh, like that, we didn't run that play as well as we should have. We dropped the ball. Whatever it may be. It is starting to document what the team could have done better, so that the next time you start sprint number 2, remember this is sprint number 1 still, all within these 5 ceremonies. When you start sprint number 2, you apply all of these learnings, all of these lessons to the next sprint. Continuous iteration, experimentation, and innovation. And that's what Agile is all about. It's a mindset shift. It is a shift in your approach. And the shift and why we're starting with this in the beginning of this course is before we even get to any content, before we even think about how we build content for our audiences, we really should be thinking about the way that you enable a team so that they can be the best that they can, aligned to clear outcomes, aligned to clear, whether it's journeys or products or sections of the marketing funnel, and really work on, as a team, a cross-stack, cross-functional group, and apply all of these ceremonies to be more innovative, be more experimental, and continuously improve. It's the only way that you'll get more efficient. It's the only way that you'll get more productive. And by the way, Agile teams tend to feel a lot more passion in their work. They tend to feel a lot more connected to business strategy. They feel a lot more connected to their workers and to their brands and to the missions that their brands stand for. And they also allow the team to get strong expertise and skill sets. So, as you build out a team of all different individuals that are going to be part of your cross-stack, fully functioning marketing pod or tribe, whatever you want to call it, all of these individuals are contributing towards an outcome in this whole ceremony schedule. And you're going to repeat it week to week to week. And you're going to get more innovative, you're going to get faster, more nimbler, adopt all these great mindsets that come with Agile. And the best thing about it is your audiences are going to benefit from it. Your audiences are going to have content that's a lot more, comes out to them probably a little bit more frequently and engages with them. Higher engagement tends to lead to higher conversion. And it's also going to, again, get domain expertise across all these people within your Agile team. They're all going to end up starting to contribute in new ways that they never have before. You're going to untap a lot of potential with the team here. So I hope you enjoy this section on Agile ceremonies, and you now have come away with the 5 ceremonies that make up an Agile sprint, and you can apply in your day-to-day. We're going to get a little bit more into this in just a minute. Okay, now that you understand how to adopt Agile marketing and what the 5 ceremonies are, we're going to get into some watch-outs. So here's, in my experience, 4 common pitfalls to Agile marketing and what you need to be observant of before you even adopt this approach. It's really important that you have the ecosystem and the infrastructure established before you even consider adopting an Agile marketing approach. Number 1, not having clear and defined outcomes. So before you even get into developing and thinking about how this approach could apply to your marketing organization or your team, it's really important that you understand what your team is going to be explicitly focused on and having very clear outcomes. So using the Spotify model, that might be a component of the buying cycle or the marketing funnel. So I am focused exclusively on awareness and nothing more. That really makes the team very accountable to make sure that they understand what the key performance indicators are, the KPIs, as well as making sure that they have very clear outcomes on the outset so that they know what they're prioritizing is going to ladder up to those outcomes. And it also removes any opportunity for them to be confused or taken away from different components of the marketing cycle. Number 2 is not having a learning agenda. So experimentation is the core of everything in Agile. If you're not learning, you're not advancing and developing and iterating and innovating. And so making sure that as you go into your sprints, as an example, you have a very clear learning agenda. And so what that could look like is wondering, well, I wonder what type of creative could resonate more with this audience, or particularly what type of channel could resonate a little bit more, and establishing a experimentation model up front to ensure that at the end of the day, you're not just distributing content and moving on to the next thing, but you're distributing that content and then learning from it. Because what that's going to allow you to do is take that learning and apply it to the next deliverable within the next sprint. And so at the end of, say, the year, as an example, you could have a full stack list of all the things that you're learning and developing about your audience and your channel tactical strategies and apply them to become even a better marketing organization and a better full stack team next year. Number 3, and this is one of my favorite components of Agile marketing, is not having defined team norms. So one of the things that I would advise you as you pull a team together to think about what that Agile approach could be is having a team norms discussion. And it may not just be one discussion, but it could be a multitude of discussions to make sure that your team is well aware of each other's strengths, opportunities, and the way they like to work. As an example, do you want to have the daily stand-up in the morning or at the end of the day, depending on when the team is most available? Do you want to make sure that the team is using Teams or Slack as a communication channel, or is text messaging or email more of a preferred channel for communication? Clearing up all those things at the front end will really help as you get into the sprint and into iterating and developing and executing much more easy and cohesive. An example is I used to work for a team that had adopted a bit of a James Bond theme as an example for everything that we did. It was kind of our brand within the internal marketing organization. And so one of our team norms was anytime someone kind of went off track or we started to move away from what our primary outcomes were going to be, anyone had the right to yell out "Martini" as an example, to refocus our concerted efforts to make sure that we were focused on what the outcomes were and get back to what we're here to do. Another example is, my kids would get off the bus at 2:30. So between the half hour of 2:30 to 3 o'clock, I would be offline because at that point, that was me going down to the bus stop, get my kids inside, get them lunch, get them all set up for what they needed to do for the rest of the day and get back to work. So team norms is something that can really advance your team to make sure that they're a high-performing, functioning group. Number 4, and this one's really important, so not accounting for your non-agile coworkers. So not everyone in your marketing organization or on your team might be able to matriculate to an agile marketing approach. And that is okay, as long as you have the right folks enabled in your core team to work in an agile approach. That will allow you to get to the outcomes that you need. But say you have a member of your team that might not be, say, in the marketing organization or might not be able to move to Agile or be fully dedicated to a group because maybe they're a shared service, as an example. Legal and compliance could be a good example in this case. And so making sure that you are accounting for them and how your new approach will actually change the operating model and interaction model with those members. The way that I would probably recommend an account for that is when you're thinking about matriculating into an agile marketing approach and model, really being clear when you're meeting with those individuals of how this will actually enable them. So what's in it for me, right? So just be sure when you are moving into an agile marketing approach, you're accounting for any type of individuals or teams that you're going to be engaging with and making sure that you're being really clear about what's in it for them and understanding why you're moving into an agile marketing approach, what that will change in terms of the operating model, and being really clear about that. So here's the thing about agile marketing. There's a lot, and there are a bunch of different things that you can apply to your business model. You don't have to apply all of them. Think about what works for you. So when you take a look at that Agile Manifesto, you'll see a number of jargony items, I would say, applying to agile marketing. Just think about what really would work and enable your team. So whether that's applying a daily stand-up, right? That's a new way of working that you can instantly start iterating on and using every single day. Taking time every day at the start of your day with your team to talk about what's working, what's not working, and what is stopping them from progressing forward can be a simple tactic that you can apply moving forward day to day. Or retrospectives, ensuring that after every time a project or a campaign is completed, you're getting back with that team and talking about and documenting what worked and what didn't work so you can apply it to the next time you embark on something similar can be an easy approach. So don't feel that you have to apply everything all at once. You can pick and choose to make sure that what you're doing will actually enable your team moving forward. So here's a question for you as we wrap up this lesson. What benefits do you see for your company in adopting agile marketing? Could it be speed to market? Could it be increasing productivity within your team? Could it be just being more disciplined about what outcomes your team is focused on? All of these things are actually benefits of agile marketing and about moving away from more traditional marketing or a waterfall approach. I'd also like to maybe ask your team, what objectives do you foresee with this technique? So I've never often seen a team go into taking on an agile approach and not have someone question, well, why are you doing this? Or what is going to be the benefit? And look out for the people that are probably going to be the most common objectors, and also leverage the people on your team that are also the advocates of agile marketing and making sure that you're using them to your full advantage when you apply this approach. All right, so the lesson recap. We finished lesson number 1 around agile marketing. So the number 1 we want to talk about is know what are an agile content marketing team's responsibilities, and take a look. Maybe this could be applied and be useful for your organization. Number 2 is really understanding the 5 distinct ceremonies and what each can enable you to do from your team to be a more high-performing team when it comes to developing your content marketing strategy. Finally, number 3 is we talked about a few common pitfalls that I have observed as different teams adopt an agile marketing approach. Remember, one of the biggest things that I've seen over the past couple of years are how big brands and small brands are thinking about how they can transform their businesses, and many are adopting an agile marketing approach. So if you can make yourself as an expert or at least an advocate for this approach early on, you can really differentiate yourself in your peer group and really enable and help your organization adopt this approach moving forward by talking about the things that we talked about today. So that concludes all about agile marketing in this first lesson. We're going to get into lesson 2 momentarily. Thank you for your time.